Welcome to Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Swing 2. Our original tape was released in the fall of 1986 and now is in use all over the world by many successful college and professional teams. It has won many awards and helped produce Baseball World's back-to-back-to-back AAU National Championship teams. Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Swing 2 features professional scout and instructor Tom Emanski, an internationally recognized instructor currently working with many professional athletes in both the American and National Leagues. Let's begin now as Coach Emanski explains the dynamic steps of the professional swing in the classroom portion of our tape. Later, we'll go to Baseball World's training facility in Altamont Springs, Florida, where our students will perform some exciting drills and revolutionary demonstrations. Let's get started with Lesson 1 as Coach Emanski discusses the stance.
Now what I'm going to do is share with you in Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Swing 2 some breakthroughs that we have made and some additional information. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is the stance. And we all hear about that, and unfortunately, many times at youth league practices, you have somebody constantly saying, what, get the elbow up, get it down, and you hear all kinds of talking about that. But I want to show you some different stances of some major league players in action. And if you take a look at our first major league player, you see here's a fellow that played very successfully a number of years in the major leagues, Eric Davis. And you notice that his base, his feet are kind of close together there, aren't they? Okay, and you notice that his hands are kind of down around his chest. We see here's another young player, and you take a look at him. Here's a San Diego Padre, and you notice that he's got the back elbow kind of way up, and then we just had one way down. So you're seeing some different things. Okay, we take a look at another major league player. Here's Tim Raines, who is a superstar player with the Montreal Expos and now with the Chicago White Sox. And you notice something about him. He's kind of laying the bat a little flatter. So you're seeing all different kinds of things. Here's a shot that we used in our first tape, Kent Herbeck, and you see that his elbow's up. But, okay, where I'm trying to go with this is there's all different kind of stances. And the key thing that our students must realize, the stance is just something that you set up at the plate and be comfortable with. There's no really correct or right stance. You'll see some feet close together. You'll see some feet wider apart. You'll see some elbows up. You'll see some elbows down. And this is why I like to say at Baseball World as a hitting instructor that it's the most overcoached area of hitting. That means there's more time spent on that than anything else. And really, the stance doesn't have anything much to do with hitting except for you to get relaxed, look out at the pitcher, and as the pitcher starts to wind up, then things happen. There's a striding and cocking and power positions where you actually rotate from, and I'll get into that later on in the tape. But the stance doesn't really hit from there. Those fellows that had that elbow way high were certainly not going to swing from there. The guy that had his hands way down here wasn't going to swing from there. But does that mean there's no such thing as some things that should happen proper in the stance? Yeah, well, there are a couple things. And number one is our first tape. We told you about having a good rhythm and a good movement, but there's something else we've discovered from our first research going on. Is there's something happening with these players right now that I think is really, really unique, and I've noticed it. Look at his legs. Can anybody notice anything about his legs right there, guys? What do you notice?
They look flexed.
Okay, they look flexed. That's correct, and that's what you see in a major league performer. Now as a scout, I'm a professional baseball scout. When I'm out there right now, I can find the difference between a rank amateur player, whether he's a collegiate player, whether he's a high school player. I can find something right away that'll let me know if he's going to be a good hitter. What do you notice about this young gentleman, young player working the Padres? You really see a lot of flex in that legs. That tells me he's going to have a loose upper body. What else do you notice about his arms there? He's kind of loose in there. Okay, we looked at Tim Raines. Here's a shot of Jim Rice. What do you notice about his legs? Yeah, as a group, what do you think? They are really flexed. Okay, now we look at these guys. We're starting to see some similarities in the flexion in the legs. So in general, what I want to recommend to you guys is spread your feet out a little bit on a wider base so you can get your legs feeling the flex there. There's also something else I want to talk about, and that's a grip. And we're going to go out into our drills later and discuss that in detail. But I want you to remember in your stance, I want you to think of your knuckles in three ways. The first grip from the wrist is one, then you have the middle group, okay, and then you have the little group up at the top. I want you to think as you hold the bat to make sure that you don't hold it back in here against your thumb. Most of all youngsters I see that come to our camps and clinics, and a lot of young amateur hitters, choke the bat back in here, and they don't get it across the callus line. And that's where you want to hold the bat, and you want to have this first group of knuckles aligned with the little ones. Now that's something I want you to think about it, and that kind of gets the back elbow semi-up a little bit, and that's where you want to be. And as you'll go through the swing, your hands actually rotate on the bat, and there becomes a whole second group that comes on contact. Now I'm going to discuss that in the drill section later. But the major leaguers in general, as we talked about. Now what do you think of this picture right here? And you guys don't know, our students in class do not know what order they're coming in. And what do you notice about this fella right here? What type of hitter would he be if you were a scout after seeing this trip?
Pretty good.
You think pretty good? What do you think, Dwayne? Okay, our older guys think he looks kind of tall, and I agree with that. You notice his legs are much more rigid. Now I'm going to find out who that player is, and I don't know. I'm going to find out, but he's a San Diego player, and I'm going to bet my reputation that he's a pitcher. And I don't know. But normally, that's what I found out. Pitchers make their living by doing what? Getting hitters out. And there's not a whole bunch of pitchers, Dwight Gooden, some of these guys. But in general, pitchers are considered weaker hitters. In fact, in the American League, they what? They have a designated hitter for those guys. But we'll find out as the time we put the names up in our final editing. We'll find out who this is. And I think you're going to find out that he's a pitcher or a weak hitter like a shortstop type of thing. And we'll take it and we're going to go ahead and change it so we don't make anybody mad at us. We won't tell you kind of who it is unless he's a pitcher. So in review, good flex in our legs, so we're sitting down with our legs almost like we can jump, guys. We want to feel in that stance we can jump. Another thing you can do right away into your games is loosen your upper body. If you can get in your stance, and wherever you want to hold your bat, if you can get real loose, what do you think is going to happen if you're real loose, Dwayne, in your arms?
Be real quick.
Well, not only that, but what's going to make you real quick when you're loose in your arms? Your lower body is going to start to come into play. And that's the key thing. Once you spread out a little bit, gentlemen, and flex those legs, and you start to loosen your upper body, you're in a situation right there to make yourself a good hitter in a hurry. So we're going to go ahead and into our next step right now. We just completed our stances, and we'll talk about this a lot more in our drill section, and we're going to talk about what happens as the ball's released in our next lesson.
In review of Lesson 1, Coach Emanski discussed that there is a wide variety of stances that exists among successful hitters. However, he recommends flex in the legs and looseness in the upper body. This promotes a much quicker swing. In review of the photograph that Coach Emanski projected to be a pitcher, later research confirmed that the player shown was a major league pitcher with a lifetime batting average of sub-200. Now, let's move on to Lesson 2 as the stride is discussed.
Okay, we went over a couple steps. We went over our stance, we went over a grip, and in the grip we're going to cover that a little more thoroughly when we actually get out with the bats and get into the drills. Okay, the next step that we're going to talk about in hitting is a very, very misunderstood one, and it's what I call the stride. Now I want you to think of a couple things. Here's what's going to happen. When the pitcher starts to wind up, he's going to come up to his release point. At that point, as he's about to let go of the ball, the hitters will instinctively, at the major league level, start to cock their hands and stride forward. Now, as we're talking, we're going to show you a picture of one of the greatest hitters in baseball, Mr. Fred McGriff. And the nice thing about this photographic sequence you're seeing that we took in spring training is there is a red pole right behind his head. And you're going to notice as he strides, his head is actually going forward in relationship to the pole. Okay, now here's some nice photos besides Mr. McGriff, too, that we'll look at. And here's a real good hitter. His name is Mr. Hatcher. He was a player that played for a number of years. In fact, he had a record one time in AAA before he came up. It was unbelievable. He hit like 377 in AAA, right around 400, and now he's a batting instructor somewhere in Major League Baseball. But I thought he had a real good natural swing, and he had a number of good years with the Dodgers and a number of clubs. He was a very accomplished Major League hitter. But you'll notice, gentlemen, as he's starting to stride, you notice that the hands are being taken back, okay, and he's kind of on a cocked angle. You notice the bottom wrist right there. You can see the bottom wrist has started to do this. This is a very, very important thing. It's actually cocked like this. Now, that position is what's called radial deviation. And that is a key thing in hitting. It's something we didn't discuss in our first video. Well, what would be the opposite of radial? This would be ulnar, which would be the opposite. Okay, so you have radial deviation of the wrist, and I'm going to tell you what that does to the movement pattern. Well, here's another great hitter right there. Here is Mr. Dave Winfield, and you notice his bottom wrist is starting to cock also. And you notice with Mr. Winfield and Mr. Hatcher, you notice that the bat angle is becoming similar, and you notice how the stride is getting a little wider. So actually what we're generating, if you remember from our different talks that we had in pitching, when the body's starting to go forward, does anybody remember what type of energy that is? Does anybody remember? Excuse me? It's a linear motion, which is forward. But there's a term in physics that I want you to become familiar with, and it's called momentum. Momentum. And momentum is a linear force. So actually, they're generating some energy by this sliding forward. Hitting is going to take many directions. You've all heard, oh, it's very important to get a good weight shift. Not true. That's not the thing that provides the power. It's a series of forces. It's momentum, which is the stride taking you forward. Then we're going to go in a few more lessons into rotary, and then the body energy is going to flow backwards. It's going to have several different things going. So it's forward, rotary, and then at contact, as the bat flies out to contact and the follow-through goes, many professional ball players actually flow backwards. So it's three different energy sources going in one. Momentum, which is linear, rotary, which is a turn, and then as the bat flies out of the center later on in your lessons, you'll see the body comes backwards, an opposite and equal reaction. So you're looking at some players right now, and let's take another look at another accomplished major league hitter. And if you look from behind, you see this is a very important position. And this is what one of our instructors, Coach Ridge, as we all know, is referred to as the hitting master of the universe. He has come up with the position as the stride is being completed, and he calls this position the slot. Can anybody notice, Brian, again, what is that bat doing as far? Is it down back on his shoulder, or is it out from his head? Where is it kind of doing in relationship to the helmet?
It's like back behind it a little bit.
Well, it's back behind a little bit, but it's splitting the helmet almost in two. Now, that's a position that's very important. If he would have taken his bat and had it flat at this point, and this is the major problem that every youth league player does during their stride. Now, I know there might be somebody out there and say, well, gee, my son hit 400 last year. I want you to do me a favor. Get your camcorder, and you're going to find out when you film your students, or your high school coaches, when you film your students, you from behind like this, wait until they stride, and you're going to see that bat go flat, almost horizontal. And the problem with that is when the bat goes flat and horizontal, the lead elbow and the wrist flatten out, and the bat goes in a sweep around the ball. And I'm going to show you a very exciting drill called the fence drill that will cure that. Well, let's get back to Mr. Hatcher again. You notice right there from a different angle, his bat is kind of splitting the back of that helmet. You notice that he's getting real looseness in the arms. Remember when I talked about that? So we know this man is in tune with his lower body. Let's look at Mr. Winfield. What do you notice about the legs? Very flexed, almost like they're getting in a position to jump from. And we look at the bat angle. It's starting to split the back of the helmet, and that's what we call slot, okay? And you're seeing some real nice shots. Okay, now we're ready to go to our third lesson, and this is going to be called the power position. And what's very interesting, this is where the stride has taken the accomplished major league player. You guys ready to go for that?
Yeah.
All right, great.
In review of the stride, we have found that major leaguers build up a linear force called momentum as the ball is released from the pitcher's hand. The players gain momentum during the stride, cock the bat, reaching the slot position, located in the back of the helmet area. If the bat flattens like many amateur players, it causes the bat to sweep, taking a much longer than necessary route to the ball. Now let's go to lesson 3 and find out where the stride has taken the accomplished professional hitter.
All right, guys, we're now into the power position, okay? And this is a very important position because this is the actual area that you're actually going to hit from. Now remember, you got in your stance, and then you went ahead and you stride, and you cocked your bat. Now your feet are going to land, and this is going to be very critical, but you're going to be balanced. You heard a lot of coaches saying about staying back, and I notice as a lot of youngsters stride, especially in their drills, they'll stride and kind of lean back. Well, remember, the power position has to be literally totally balanced. At this time, think of yourself as a basketball player guarding somebody. You wouldn't be leaning. If you were playing football and you were a linebacker, you certainly would not be trying to make tackles from leaning to the side. But many players get very confused on staying back, okay? Now, we all know in baseball we certainly don't want to lunge forward, okay? But we don't want to create another problem. I'm out of balance right now by lunging, by being forward. Well, wouldn't I also be out of balance by leaning back? Yes, exactly. So your stance has your weight a little bit on the back leg, but as the momentum was built up, which was our linear force, and as we cocked our hands, we now reach the power position, and that position is going to be very balanced. Now here's a player, Billy Doran. He's played a number of years from the Astros, and a reason I like this shot is because it's from behind him as a left-handed player. And you notice, what do you notice about that front arm there? A couple things you notice about it. Can anybody see anything there? Yeah, Brian?
It looks like he's real loose.
It looks like he's real loose. Good answer. So I was hoping to say, what else you notice about it, anybody?
It's flexed and down.
It's flexed and pointing down. And remember we talked about the slot? And how many people do we say get into the slot? Most of the all-stars from Little League or most of our high school players? No. Only the accomplished major league professional. And as a scout, I'm telling you, when you find a guy that naturally does this, you got a hitter. Okay, but that slot position is the bat is cutting roughly the back of the head. Now, if it was a little bit over more and covered his number or a few degrees either way, that's okay, but it's generally in the slot. And the only way you can stay in that slot is when you have this elbow down here and you notice that the bat would be at this angle. Also, we talked about the grip. I want you to also notice that Major League players, if you focus on this hand, it's going to be in this position here. It's not going to be back here. Now, I want you to all try that with me right now. Go ahead and put your elbow down on the lead arm. Get it extended a little bit. You notice how Mr. Doran has some extension. He's not kind of in a V. He's extended back like Wayne's doing back here. I think Tripp's given an excellent example. Tripp, I want you to try going ahead and cocking the wrist, which we talked about earlier, was called what? Radial deviation, right? That's the radial deviated wrist. And turn your wrist out a little bit like he had it. And as you notice, as you go to the ball, it's a beautiful short stroke. Now let's try some opposite things. Let's put our wrist the opposite way, okay? And let's go ahead and pull the wrist in like this, and now sweep your arm. What do you notice it wanted to do?
Uppercut.
Well, not so much an uppercut, but you notice it's taking you out and around. Now we're going to do this in drills, but I want you to remember for right now, it's not important until we go out to the drills that we discuss it. Two very important things happen in the power position, that the bottom wrist is out like this here, okay, and it's cocked. And when you do that, you'll get this type of motion to the ball. If you don't do it, most youth league players are up in here and they'll get that sweep. Well, let's look at a couple other power positions real quick. And here's a real good shot of one of the real good Montreal Expo players. I like this shot because we show his stance. His legs are kind of flexed. His arm are loose. And then you notice after he completes his stride, or as his foot's landing, he's very balanced at this point in time. And you'll notice that the bottom wrist is actually bent back out this way. These are very important things to the movement pattern. And here is Fred McGriff. And you're going to see Fred throughout the tape. And you notice when is Fred leaning backwards, Brian?
No.
Is he leaning forward
No.
at this point in time? Can you see that, Robbie? See it, Paul? See it, Tripper? Okay, you see what I'm talking about? So in the stance, we were a little bit back. But as we strided and cocked it, we ended up getting into an extremely balanced position. And you can see from the back of Fred's head, he's got that slot. He's got that slot. And you can't get in that slot position without having that wrist cocked and out like this type of thing. And I'll explain to you in your drills later on what the benefit that's going to give for you. Well, here's another shot right now of Mr. Hatcher. We covered him earlier. This is in a different game, a different time. But you notice he's in the slot. His foot's just about to land, and he's very balanced. Okay. Now, from this balanced position, something's going to happen real dramatic, okay? And it's going to be what we call the approach to the baseball begins, and that's going to be started into a rotary action. If you remember, in pitching talk we talked about, there's some momentum, which is the stride. We reached a power position. Remember that in pitching? And then the dynamic energy change occurred. So right now the motion is what type of motion we're operating with as we're striding and cocking. Somebody know what kind it is?
Linear.
Linear, okay, which momentum. And then once we establish our power position, something different is going to happen, and it's going to switch to another type of energy. And I'm going to show you that in the next lesson. You guys ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Remember, after the stride is completed, we're now in the power position. The elbow of the lead arm is down and flexed. The bottom wrist is cocked or radial deviated and extended. The bases become much wider than the original stance, obtaining balance. And the head and eyes are tracking the ball. Now, let's go on to our next lesson, where the actual approach to the ball begins.
All right, guys, we've gone through our different phases. We were in our stance. We had our good grip. We went through our linear motion to stride and cock in the bat, which got us into a balanced power position. I'm going to show you just a couple shots of the power position, and then I'm going to show you what happens next. Here again, here's Mr. McGriff. And Fred has just reached his power position. You notice he has the bat in the slot. You notice he has that elbow up, like I told you, kind of not way up high, but he's in that position which the good grip caused. And you notice that his body, would you say he's forward, backwards, or balanced, if you had to make a guess?
I'd say balanced.
Yeah, and I agree. It's 100% balance. Look at Mr. Raines as he was striding and landing. This is a review of the power position. You notice that he is about as balanced as any athlete's going to be, in my opinion. So he's not, if this leg would be locked kind of back if it was an amateur hitter, because a lot of players will work on their hitting, and as they stride, they drive me crazy in a lot of my classes because they'll come in here and they'll stride and they'll lean back. Remember, they're trying to avoid by that a lunge. But this is out of balance. This is out of balance. So now we've established what a real good balance position is, and now we're going to go on right now to show you what happens next. We've been following Mr. McGriff around, and you notice here's a real nice enlargement right now, and there's something happening different in this photo that we didn't see in the power position. This is what I call the approach. Can you see what it is, Paul? What's happening right now? Anybody notice anything? No, you're having trouble picking up? Okay, Matt saw the lower half, and we can tell the lower half is starting, and you're correct, by the knee is starting to turn forward. Now, I want everybody to understand, the knee actually has no ability to turn forward. Your knee can only do two things. Your knee can flex, and it can extend, flex and extend. So what's actually happening right now is that knee is starting to inward turn. It's actually his hips are starting. If you notice, his arms are still loose, and he's in the slot. Okay, well, let's look at another Major League player at that position. And in fact, let's take Fred even a little further on than he was. Well, now what do you notice about Mr. McGriff? Can you tell? Well, that knee has really inward rotated. Let's look at the difference between the two sequences. In what photo, in this photo here or in this photo here, is he further along in his rotation, gentlemen? The smaller photo you can really notice. And also, what's key thing to note is that you see the bat is still in the slot. So what's happening, we're getting a real strong lower rotary position, which the front upper body is still staying loose. So what's happening is a tension's being built up like a spring ready to explode. Well, let's look at our next shot of Mr. Raines. Remember, he was in the power position. He was all balanced. Well, you know, right now, what can you tell? You see that the lower half of the body is starting to turn. Look at the legs through there. This guy is balanced. He's starting a different type of energy. The hips are starting to do what, gentlemen? Can you tell me? Rotate. They're starting to rotate. So the momentum, which is what? A forward force, is now changing, took us to a balanced position, and now it's kicking into a rotary position. So there's several things I told you that were going to happen today, did I not? I said you were going to go ahead. The stance wasn't all that important. That the stride would gain momentum, which was a forward motion. You'd reach a balanced position. You would start to rotate. And what did I tell you would happen after contact? Your body, a lot of times, will come back, an opposite and equal reaction. 3 different types of energy going on during the swing. Now here's a shot. I don't think anybody in class, and for the audience, this has not been staged at all, okay? So I don't know if any of you guys can tell who that is, but it's a San Diego Padre. Can anybody see who that is? We notice one thing he's doing. He's taking his lower half and he's starting to rotate, is he? Like our other hitters. I saw this player years ago when he was San Diego Padres and took his picture and kept it for the future film, because at that time I predicted this fellow was going to become a good hitter because of him being flexed in the arms, a good wide base, and the lower half starting to turn. Anybody know who that is? Tell you, it's John Kruk, who's now Philadelphia Philly. You could see right then, as a professional scout, you could see a guy when he's doing these things, okay, is going to be a great hitter. Now we're going to take you through a drill section, and right now what we're doing, we're training you in a classroom type of situation to at least know what the right information is. Then later we're going to take you out into the step-by-step building block method in our drills. But I also want you to remember there's more than mechanics to this, gentlemen. Okay, the mechanics are really important at the big league level. Everything has to be efficient, but it's that mental attitude of getting up in the plate and feel confident, and that's where your coaches come in as a support group. In the AAU, winning 3 national champions, I've never yelled at anybody for striking out. If they swing at a pitch that it's too high or they pull off the ball, I don't know. Tripp, have you ever swung at a pitch that was way over your head? Mm-hmm. Did you need a coach to yell at you that was way over your head? No. You didn't need that. Okay, have you ever swung at a real bad pitch, Brian?
Yes.
Has everyone ever bounce?
Yes.
Yeah, and what did they tell you? What's wrong with you? It bounced. You say, well, thank you. I never knew that. See, that's the kind of thing I want to stress with coaches. We work here at Baseball World with the mechanics, and then when we get into the game, that's not when we teach the players, okay? We do that in our drills, and in the game, Robbie, if you swing at a bad pitch, or Paul, you do, or you pull off the ball type of thing, I'll be your cheerleader and supporter and your best buddy all through the ball game, and then we'll discuss it later. And so there is a mental aspect to this game, no doubt about it. So we're now noticing the hips are coming into play, and now the next lesson I'm real excited about because it's a real interesting point in the swing, and I've never heard it discussed in any tapes or lessons or whatever, and it's what I call the explosion point. We're going to go to that, and I think you're going to be really amazed because only the greatest hitters in baseball get there. You ready to see that?
Yeah.
All right, good.
In Lesson 4, we noticed that the lower body and hips start the swing. This was visually noticeable by the inward rotation of the rear knee. Remember, the upper body held back, creating resistance much like a tightly wound spring ready to be released. Remember, Coach Emanski also believes that during the ball game, coaches and parents should be supporters and avoid pointing out the flaws that exist in a swing. At Baseball World, we encourage the batter. As long as his swing is aggressive, he is always patted on the back. In this way, swinging the bat becomes a positive action rather than a negative one. Now, let's continue with teaching the mechanics of the Major League Swing 2 as a revolutionary breakthrough is discussed in Lesson 5.
All right, guys, we're now ready for Lesson 5, which we call the explosion point. Okay, it's a quick review. We went through our stance, we strided in our linear motion, we reached the power position, we started our hips, our lower body, and we noticed our hips were turning by, how did we know the hips came into play, Brian? Do you remember in a quick review?
By rotary action.
How did you know the rotary action occurred? Does anybody remember?
Saw the knee inward turn.
Yes, you saw the back knee go in there. All right, now at this point in time, we've seen the ball, we've strided and cocked, we're starting to approach, and about this point in time, we make the decision of whether we're pulling the trigger and going after the ball or not. And when we do, if we keep the right angles, which I'm going to go through in the lesson, remember the wrist being out this way, the wrist being cocked, the radial deviation, okay, the slot we were in. Now we're in a position, and if all those things occurred correctly, we're going to get a position that I've never heard discussed in hitting, and I'm kind of excited about it, and it's what we call the explosion point. Now, what makes the explosion point so neat? It's the actual position where the energy changes as the body's rotating, that the bat flies out to the ball. Okay, now I just want to use a term of physics. We used one earlier, okay, and that was momentum, which was a linear force. Now we're getting into one called centrifugal force. Yeah, Tripp smiled at me and he's going, oh, jeepers. Yeah, but this is only going to hurt for a minute, okay? Centrifugal force is force that's generated through rotation. So we already know we're into that phase by the back knee, right, of the back knee. So we know we're into that. And if everything lines up correctly like we want it to, okay, you're doing all the correct things, centrifugal force will jettison the bat out of the center of the turn out to the ball. And that's where the ball is. The ball's actually in front of you and out of the center. So we want to have the bat flow through centrifugal force out to the ball. If you had, there's another force I want you to try to remember, and this is the last term I'm going to use, so it's only going to hurt. It's called centripetal force, okay? And I try to remember it by trip, okay? Centripetal force. Centrifugal is the bat going out of the center, directed out of the turn. Centripetal, the bad force of rotation, is when everything stays in the center of the turn. And how do we normally see that in a game? When a guy spins off the ball, he pulls his head, and what does the coach yell? Don't pull your head off the ball. Well, because you had your butt sunk or different things, or you went ahead and flattened the bat and got out of the slot and took the bat in a circle, that pulls you all off the ball rather than coming down to the ball through centrifugal force. Now, this is all going to make a lot more sense once we get out to our drill section and we can go over that and give you actual demonstrations. But you notice that right now, this is one of the greatest hitters in baseball. Does anybody know who it is? Mike Smith. Okay, it's great that you guys remember Mike. All right, well, we'll look at, that is a great, the bat head, see the head of the bat? It's above his hands, and he still has the lead arm flexed, and we see the lower body leading there. We'll take a look at this picture, and I think you're going to find the positions very similar. You see that the head of the bat is above his hands, and you also notice that the elbow's flexed, and we had a good lower body lead. Anybody know who that is?
Frank Thomas.
Frank Thomas, and I think we could make a pretty strong argument that Frank Thomas is a pretty good hitter. There's two of the greatest hitters in the game. All right, given that, let's look for other hitters coming along and see if they're going to be a good hitter. All right, here's a hitter, very similar, a lefty. You see how the lower body really went? And you notice that the bat head's above the hands with the front arm flexed. You'll say, well, Coach, how can you tell that his lead arm is still flexed? Okay, well, if he didn't get in the slot, where would that bat be? It'd be way out here someplace. And there's a young hitter, a fellow by the name of Ken Caminiti with the Astros, a good hitter with some potential, real good. We can identify them. Here's a young student that appeared in our first tape, a young fellow by the name of Eddie Taubensee. Okay, Eddie Taubensee is one of the fellows that came up through our program, and he actually, when he started in high school, he was cut as his freshman year. He had trouble making the even freshman team at his high school. He came to us, went through a lot of hard work, and this past season, in about 300 at-bats, worked very hard on his swing, and after hitting a good 300 or so in AAA, actually hit 250 last year and 9 home runs with the Astros, and he's on his way. But you see he's starting to work on those things, and you see with the front side, Eddie's front arm is loose, and the bat head is above his hands, and he has a real good lower body lead. Okay, these are all the things that are done by a major league player. Okay, now you see some guys like Mike Smith, you see some guys like Frank Thomas, and then you even see players like young Eddie Tabanseh coming up. Here's another player I'm going to predict is going to be a pretty good major league hitter. You notice that the bat head's above his hands, and you notice there's so much torque developing there, you can almost see the bat bending. Okay, this is a young fellow. His lower body's really starting to turn. He's in a real good position to hit the ball. And this is a AAA picture, and his name is Jim Thome. I want you to remember him. He's one of the guys with Cleveland Indians. So I want you to see, audience, we're just not going ahead and taking guys that are the greatest hitter in the games right now, but we're showing people at the AAA level and entry league, major league players, because they all have a lot of common components that you don't see in the high school, college player, and certainly in the youth league players. So that's what we want to pattern ourselves off of, these guys that are getting success at that level. You're coming down to the last few hundred people in the world. You take the whole planet, and there's only about 300 to 400 guys, okay, that are making their living as professional major league athletes. There's certainly not a lot of guys. I believe about 700 is an approximate figure. So these guys are going to be doing some things right. All right, let's look at another picture. Now I want to show you a couple youth league players and how they would look. What was one of the key things? We talked about bat head above the hands with the lead arm flexed. We'll take a look at this photo. Here's a young little leaguer. Real sharp shot. You see the balls in there. You notice some different things. The bat head is not above the hands at that point. You also notice that the lead arm is already straight rather than flexed. Let's look at another player, and this is what it looks like. The bat head being below the hands, okay? And you'll see in our other photo, you notice that the front arm is locked out, and when that occurs, the bat is going to have a sweeping effect, which means it goes in a big circular pattern rather than our really nice slot position inside to out. Now this is going to be a lot better demonstration when we get back in our drills and you see our fence drills and that kind of thing. All right, we worked pretty hard. Everything's looking good with we see our major league athletes. Well, what's the next step they're probably going to go to, which is going to be our next one? Can anybody guess? Contact with the ball, and we'll get ready for that in a moment.
In review, we noticed that the explosion point is the halfway point in the swing, and the bat head is above the hands with the front arm still flexed at this point. Remember, only elite major league players reach this position. Notice, at this point, an energy change takes place. As the batter continues to rotate, the bat will jettison out of the center of the turn and fly out to contact, the focus of our next lesson.
All right, guys, now we're at a very important area, and this is called contact. An old instructor told me once years ago, he says, Tom, it's pretty important because there aren't any contracts without contact. And that kind of says it all. Also, another thing you have to realize, there's not a lot of photos of a player right on contact because it occurs in 1/1000th of a second. That's all the time that the ball's on the bat, so it's pretty tough to get some shots. And also, there's a lot of misconceptions about how your body is on contact. So I'm going to try to clear some of that up for you today. And I want you to notice something here. It's a really great shot. Does everybody know who that is? Yeah, Bo Jackson, a real popular player, and he's had some injuries that maybe stopped him from becoming one of the greatest hitters of all times, but he's still a great player even today. But you notice this is a shot taken a Bo, and I'm really happy with this shot because you can clearly see that he's palm up, palm down on contact, and there is some confusion that the wrists are rolled on contact. You also hear swing level. I think every one of us from the time we played Little League all the way up, you hear get a good level swing. Well, I want you to think of this, gentlemen, that the ball when you're up to the plate is actually away from you and it's down. The strike zone at the older level is right around the belt on down. Now, how in the world would you ever contact that with the bat level? Well, their answer is you're not going to be able to do it. Robbie, do you know how?
Crouch way down.
That would be the only way. You'd have to crouch way down, and there's not many people that can crouch real low down, and you notice Bo is not doing that at this point. Here's another player right now. I like the angle, and you can see the bat's not level. And the bat, I have filmed literally through high-speed film sequences many, many, many players, and the bat is not going to be level, and we'll explain that in the drills later on. Another key thing I want you to look at on contact with Mr. Jackson, when you're having a good road reaction and you're having contact, I want you to notice where his ear is and his back knee. Okay, you'll notice his ear is in line with the back knee. He's not actually out forward on this particular sequence. Okay, and that is very, very important. Here's a shot we used in our first tape also. It's one of our students, and he did a nice job of his ear lined up over the back knee. Very interesting, and we notice that the bat is not level in these sequences, and we'll explain that later in the drill. Now, there's also a lot of misconception, and I told you there was going to be a lot of them, from the swing level to the roll your wrist. And the reason there's not a lot of research done on it, because we told you 1/1000th of a second is all the shot you got to get. That happens in such a split second. Now, another thing, you've all heard the term swing down. Well, you notice our players at this point in time aren't. And here's a nice shot I got of one of the Astros, Mr. Finley. And you notice, where did his bat hit on the ball? Hit the top half, as if he was swinging down on that particular one. Not necessarily. He just happened to hit the top half. And where's the ball going? Down. So let me tell you something. If you were swinging the bat literally straight down, okay, you're going to hit the top half of the ball. And when you hit the top half of the ball, it's going to go down. Okay, and studies have been done. If you hit the ball down on the ground, okay, your odds of getting a base hit are 23%. So that means if you got your wish by swinging down and hit it down, you would have a 230 batting average. Okay, and there are actually ground balls occur about 40% of the time, roughly. The other thing is, if you had a chance to hit extremely under the ball, where would the ball go? Well, the ball would go up, and when that goes up, your chances of getting a hit, studies have been done, show you got about a 21% chance of getting hit, which is about 210. Also, when you're aiming at something, if you're thinking, and I'm not staging this, if you're trying to hit something, are you going to try to hit the top of it? Are you going to try to hit the under it? Or are you going to try to hit the back half middle of it? What would you try to do, gentlemen?
Back half middle.
Yes, that's common sense. And if you did that, okay, and you hit the back half middle of it, which this guy's doing right here in the photo, he's right back square right in the middle. The bat's not level. He doesn't have to be level to hit the thing in the middle. And that's some misconceptions on these things. But you notice, all right, well, now what percentage does he have? Line drives only occur 20% of the time in the big league level, okay, in professional baseball. If you hit that ball on the line, do you know what percentage chance you got of getting a hit now? It's 71%. 71%. So if you hit the ball, the back half middle, you have a batting average of 710. And I bet by today's standard, if you were hitting 710, you might get a pretty good contract. What do you think? They wouldn't be able to pay you enough money to play the game. So the thing is, we're shooting for the back half middle. If we happen to get a little over, we get our ground ball. Okay? If we happen to get a little under, we're going to get our pop-up. Okay? So about 40% of the time we're going to hit ground balls, 40% of the time we're going to get a pop-up, about 20% of the time we're going to get our line drive. So it's the back half middle is the ticket. Now we're about ready to go on to our next section and what it's going to be called follow-through. And I want you to look what happens to the body. We notice them pretty much right now. The players rotated in a real balanced position. They haven't really gone forward, have they, gentlemen? No, they just rotated, and the bat's flying out of the center of the turn. And now we're going to go for our next lesson, which is going to show you the conclusion of what happens. And we're going to be calling it the follow-through position. And we're going to find out once and for all, is the body shifting through, or is the body going to come back? And that's going to be a very interesting lesson. Ready for that one?
Yeah.
All right.
In Lesson 6, we noticed that the bat was not level when it made contact with the ball. Remember, we do not recommend hitting the top half of the ball, as actual statistics show that 43% of all balls hit in the Major League are ground balls, of which only 22% become a base hit. Flies and pop-ups occur 34% of the time, and only 21% result in base hits. Line drives are the ticket. Although they occur only 20% of the time, 71% of them become base hits. That's why Coach Emanski stresses, strive to hit the back half middle of the ball. Now let's move on as Coach Emanski discusses the follow-through.
All right, gentlemen, we're ready for our last lesson, and this basically lets us know in the follow-through. But let's do a quick review. We get in our stance, okay, and that was kind of any way we wanted it to be, as long as we had a couple things that we said were really necessary, and that was a loose flex legs, okay, and a very loose bat, okay, and arms, no tension up here. We talked about a real nice grip, and we discussed that with the first knuckles with the middle, right? And then we talked about as the ball was being released, we were going to stride and cock our bat, okay? And when we stride and cock, that kind of would tuck our shoulders. A lot of confusion where people want you to rotate your shoulders in. I heard a lot of coaches talk about rotating. If you just take your hands back just as nice as can be, that'll tuck them a little bit for you. And that took us to a position, what was called the power position. And was that power position a forward thing or a backward thing or what? Do you remember, Dwayne?
It's more of a level, a balance thing.
It was a balance thing. Did you agree with that, Brian? Okay, it was real balance at that time. Then what happened after that? What happened after we went ahead and got in the balanced position? What happened next? Does anybody remember?
Pivot.
Okay, the lower half of the body started to turn and rotate, and that took us to a key position which we called the explosion point with the bat head above the hand. And then we made contact with the ball, with the bat not level. And there's a lot of people who are going to say some things about that, but we're going to be glad to show you in our drills and why they wouldn't be. And please, there is a lot of confusion, and you got to remember, for 1/1000th of a second, it's a lot to ask for somebody doing with their eyes. Baseball World has shot 3 camera angles from 1982 through 1993, and electronically computerized video printed it, and consult with medical doctors and physicists and that type of thing. So we think we got a pretty good hitting training program. And especially since we led the nation in the AAU hitting for 3 consecutive years in home runs. We've led them in batting average, we've led them in extra base hits, and we've also led them in contact. Our number 1 through number 7 hitters in the lineup for the past 3 years strike out less than 2 times per game. So it really works. And we have a number of players that are at the major league levels, including some of the top major league professionals using this program. So with that, we're following through and we're summarizing with the follow through. And we saw films of Mr. Fred McGriff and still shots, and Fred was going through all the correct points. And Fred's a player that actually came and worked out with Baseball World back early in his career and has done a lot of nice things for Baseball World. But here he is in contact. And a lot of people think that he might weight shift because he takes his top hand off the bat and all that kind of stuff. But you notice right now, Fred, would you say he's forward, balanced in the middle, or leaning backwards a little bit?
Leaning back.
You can see it right now. There's a little bit of back follow-through on that. Here's another player at the Twins, I believe Mr. Knobloch. Great looking picture right there. And when you notice as they're contacting, the body starts to lean a little bit back. So what's happening, guys, and how that happens, as the body rotates, there's a force we want to generate that gets the bat out of the center of the turn, and we discussed that as centrifugal. And if we got things misaligned and our butt was sunk, our back was straight, and we spin, we'd pull off, generate. Can anybody remember what that force was, the bad one? I gave you a key word there. Yep, centripetal, okay? And that one is a law of physics, too, that says as we rotate, things can stay in the turn. And how do you normally see that in a game? That's when the head pulls off when you see that one. So you notice these guys are generating great centrifugal force. They've now followed down through there, and they're doing a real good job.
Just after contact occurs, the body will have a slight flow backwards. This is one of the basic laws of physics. As the bat jettisons out of the center of rotation from the explosion point to contact, an equal and opposite reaction occurs. The bat moves forward, the body drifts backwards. This concludes this class portion of today's presentation. Now, let's go out to our training facility in Altamont Springs, Florida for some exciting drills and demonstrations.
All right, we've just come out of the classroom section where the young men have learned all the mechanics in the sequence they occur. As we talked about in class, they now have it here, but now we have to get it into muscle memory. One of the drills we use is just a simple T drill, and a lot of people have a lot of confusion exactly what the T does. A lot of people think by them hitting off the T, they're going to gain some hand-to-eye coordination. Actually, that's not the purpose. We want them to have the good mechanics they learned in class to be part of their reactionary skills. So that means we're going to slow this down into a cycle where Justin can do it again and again, and all our students, and the more they do of the correct repetitions, the more it will become part of their reactions when they get into a ball game. And he actually could be doing these motions without the T at all, but it would be kind of very boring just to be swinging without anything to swing at, and that's the purpose of it. Now, the first thing we're going to do is break this down into step-by-step method. Justin, you ready to go? Justin is a player that's playing in Little League this year at a local Little League, and going to have a real good year there. And we're going to have him first get in a stance. If you notice, get in your stance. Okay, stay relaxed. You notice he has flexion in the leg and he's using his legs. He's not overall stiff looking. We're going to go ahead and have him stride and cock the bat. Boom, and now he reaches the power position. A couple things we're going to check for at this point in time. Is he tension free in his arm? Something else I suggest, coaches, is to go over at this point and feel their backs in here, and he has a little bit too much tension there. I can feel tightness. What we're looking for, he needs to be real loose. As we remember, we talked about the power coming from the lower body, and the lower body here being the engine, and the top part of the body just being the transmission system. So coaches, after you have them stride and cock the bat, if you feel a lot of tension in the upper body, it's a sure telltale sign they're going to be an upper body hitter. If they're loose here, you know there's a real good chance they'll use their lower half. Next thing we check for his grip, we see are his number 1 knuckles on the bottom hand lined up with the middle 2, okay? And if we see that, also we want to have the flexion in the wrist with the wrist pointing out this way rather than in here, okay? And he's doing all that, and that's going to help him have a real good sound short arc to the ball. All right, let's try it again. Set up again in your stance, Justin, okay? At this point, it's just an observation post. He's feeling loose, relaxed. Hopefully he feels confident in what he's doing, and we're going to go have him stride and cock the bat. Boom. Now we're going to engage the lower half with a 2 call. Go ahead and 2, and now you see he started his lower half. One of the key things that we find from doing literally thousands of lessons is they have some trouble with the back or right leg. If you look right now, coaches, and let's focus on this if we can, he's getting a little high on the heel at this point in time. This is something, guys, we want to try to avoid. The only reason his heel needs to come up at all is that his back foot is going to pivot or turn. And if he gets too much like this, it's going to throw him off balance forward. So we want Justin to make sure that his back foot is just enough off the ground so it allows him to pivot. This is something that you'll find, coaches, as you do this drill, that's going to be a problem with all the kids. So keep your eye on that. The other thing we want you to focus on is he going to be loose in the upper body? And he is. He's made an adjustment now, I could tell there. 2 very important things. Okay, he's in the 2 phase. Let's go ahead, for continuity purposes, let's set him up and do it again. Get in your stance. Got a boy. Now he's following the directions real good. Let's go ahead and add our baseball. Let's go ahead and stride and cock the bat. Start the lower half, and let's go ahead 3, drive it right off the tee. Very good. And you notice what Justin's done for me. He's held his swing right there. Relax and set up. Go ahead and relax, set it back in your stance. A big problem that we find with a lot of our young students or coaches, good, well-meaning coaches, make a mistake by trying to build hand speed by throwing these balls quick without a lot of time between each one. And what happens is the fellow won't follow through then. He'll be in a hurry to get back, and you're going to create an upper body hitter by doing that. So he did a real good job of freezing and staying, following through until his command was to come back. And a very good bat speed. Okay, we'll go ahead and nice and loose. I really like the way he's loose. He has a little natural rhythm. We'll go ahead and tell him to stride and cock the bat. We'll tell him to start his lower half and go ahead and 3 and drive it off. Good job. Now we can add a little bit to this drill. You notice in the class for the first time, Baseball World released the explosion point. So we're going to add this drill and change it to what we call a 1, 2, 3, 4 drill. And we're going to add the 3rd step, and we're going to show you what that looks like. All right, Justin, let's go ahead and set up. Stride and cock the bat. 2. Okay, you notice the knee is inward rotated, meaning the hips have engaged. His back heel problem's coming up again. Get back on balance. All right, now rotate to 3. 3, right into there. And you notice what he's doing at this point in time. He should be still back up in here, as we saw Mike Smith and the other power hitters. He's right in here. And right from here, this is the 3 position. We're going to have him go 4 and drive it off. 4. Not too bad. Good drive. Good drive. All right, now he showed that he can do that, so let's make it a little more reactionary, and we'll just go to soft toss. All right, Jason, you ready for this? Okay, set up nice and loose. 1. Take your hands back in more, relax. 2. Okay, he started early on that, and that means he's going to be a little acceptable to curveball. Now, we have special drills we do with these kids to keep checking them all the way through. And if you'll take a look at me on this and look at Justin at the same time, you're going to see that here's a different little drill. Good. He hasn't committed to the ball. Very good. Now we can go ahead and throw him the ball or not. He doesn't know. Ready to go? Good job. Nice swing. Ready to go? Very good. Real good bat speed. A lot of power there. Doing a good job. Good. And you notice he hasn't made any commitment to the ball. Do it again. Another variation. Very good. That's what we call the curveball soft toss, coaches. And basically what that means is before we had a nice trajectory, the ball was always in a nice spot to hit, but we all know there's 2 things about a curveball that make it more difficult to hit. A lot of people think it's not the break so much that makes it hard to hit, it's the off-speed nature of the pitch. And that's what I did. I threw the ball higher this time. Takes a little practice, but you'll get used to it. And what we had to do is Justin had to wait for the ball to come down to the strike zone. Most people will chase it up high, and he did a very good job with that. And now we just vary the different soft tosses. There was a regular one. Here is the fake. He did a good job. He passed the test. And coaches, he's making it look easy, but try this with your players at all levels, whether it be high school or college, and you're going to find out that this is not as easy as it looks. And we have different variations in the curveball soft toss, and he just really impressed me with that, and I'm tough to impress. That was a very good job. Very good job. Okay, good job. All right, here we go. Wow, that ball was hit very well. Robbie, you want to come on in? Okay. Now this isn't for only little leaguers or pre-little leaguers, or we do these same drills whether we're working with high school, college, and we do have experience working with Major League All-Stars in both American and National League, and we always use the same type of drills. All right, I want to mention one thing right now, and that's the bat we're using. I'm going to step in here and show you real quick what this is. This is a breakthrough that I think we've made. A gentleman by the name of Gary Ridge, who we call the hitting instructor of the universe, came up with this idea. And basically what it is, we want to have that real nice wrist-cocked action and the bat head above the hands and going to the ball, just like we've seen our major leaguers do. Well, the problem is the strength of a young player and the strength of a major league player is so much different, it's unbelievable. You know, you have people that can bench press 300 pounds and some people that have trouble lifting 50. So even though the bats in Little League are smaller, proportionally, the kids don't get the same dominance over the bat that a major leaguer does. You get a guy swinging a 34, 32 in the major leagues, and then they have a 28-ounce aluminum bat or 27, still proportionally the aluminum bat is still much heavier to him. So he came up with the bat. We call it a hitting stick, and we'll have them available through the school and talk to you about them. But what it is, it's a scaled-down wood bat that proportionally is the same size and weight to what it would be if he was a major league player, what their bat would be. This thing, I don't know, weighs 16 ounces or something like that, if that. It's a very light thing, and Robbie's going to be able, the young players are going to be able to dominate it and get the same feel that they would if they were using a major league bat. The same type of strength patterns would exist. Okay. Robbie, you want to move back just a little bit this way, son? This way, right there. Set up, and we're just going to go right through our 1, 2, 3 drill with him. 1, 2. Good job. All right, stay set up. 1, 2. We're going off the other drill, and we call this the balance drill. Coach Bodemiller is going to go ahead and fake the soft toss. Boom, and we check to see if he has balance. At this point in time, he's improving, but we'll ask to make him drop his bat. Go ahead, get balance, like a linebacker, like he's a basketball player, and now he picks up the bat, and he is now going to rotate right out of there, and he hits a line drive. Now you notice his balance has improved, and we'll allow him to kick in the lower side, kick in the backside, and rotate through. And now we're getting line drives. Before we were getting balls going over the fence. Now let's give an example of bad balance. Go ahead and stride. Hold that position, lock the leg a little bit more, and try to stay back like you heard. You notice now Blake is out of balance backwards. Now a lot of well-meaning coaches tell him to stay out of balance, to stay back, because they're afraid of this. Put all your weight on the front leg, right there. Yeah, well that's out of balance, but so is that. They're both forms of imbalance. And you can't correct the lunging with staying back. So let's go ahead and try the balance drill again. Go ahead and set up nice and comfortably. Let's stride and cock the bat. Let's go ahead and drop the bat. He's not balanced. He's too far back. Let's correct it up. Correct it up. Bring your feet in just a little bit there. Nice and balanced. Let's pick up the bat. And now he's post stride, and he'll rotate out of there. And we get another line drive up the middle. Really effective drill, and we call this the balance drill. And we're trying to correct Blake, like most of our students, and even some of our major league pro athletes have this problem in post stride. Let's go ahead and stride and cock. Start the lower half. He has good balance, so we'll let him drive the ball. And we've made a major correction in his swing in just a few minutes. We talked about in our drills and in class the importance of the proper grip and alignment. And I want to discuss again, on the bottom hand, we talked about in our original tape that top hand is closer to the pitcher, and we're in a slot. We also talked about that today in teaching the mechanics of the Major League 2. I want you to focus now on the importance. Remember, our bottom wrist has to be cocked, and that is thumb towards the abdomen is the medical term, which is called radial deviation, okay? The other thing we want our wrist to do is extend, which means turn this way, okay? Look at your baseball cards at home, guys and coaches, and just see how many players in their stance. You'll see we'll have the one knuckles aligned with the two, radial deviation of the wrist, and extended. All right, now I'm going to show you what would happen if you didn't do that, and this is what you're going to see, and about 95% of all high school, college, and youth league athletes will not have, in the post-stride, this position, okay? They're going to look kind of like I didn't cock my hands, and I'm not radial deviated, and I'm not extended in the wrist. Now, no matter what I do or how hard I try, as I rotate, I want you to notice the key thing that is now happening, I'm hitting the fence, okay? Now, we're going to do it the pro way. Cock the bat, radial deviate the wrist, which is actually what's happening, extending. Now watch, as I go to the ball, I've actually leaned backwards, and I did not hit the fence. This proves conclusively that this affects the whole movement pattern. Again, non-cocked wrist, rotate, cocked wrist and extended, rotate. Drive it through. All right, let's even cheat further. Put your foot down in the hole in the fence there, way down there. Now he's up against the fence, and it looks like there in no way in the world he can swing. Stride and cock the bat, radial deviate the wrist and make sure it's extended out, and just rotate and forget it's there. Trust me on it and see what happens. There you go. That's quite an amazing demonstration. Now, let's do it like most hitters do. Stride and cock the bat. On radiate the wrist. Put the bat straight up and down. Now, a lot of people think that's the shorter, quicker approach to the ball. Don't think about it. Just don't cock your wrist and swing from there. Very impressive. Okay, a couple more the right way. Stride and cock the bat. Start your lower half. Drive it out of there.
We've just seen in all our drills, the T drill, the soft toss drill, the fake soft toss drill, the soft toss curveball drill, and the fence drill, certain elements apply. Stay loose in the upper body. Stride to a balanced power position. Initiate the swing with the lower muscle groups of the body. Keep the bat head above the hands and out front, arm flexed at the explosion point, and rotate to contact, striving to hit the back half middle of the ball. We have found that these techniques will result in a dynamic increase in contact percentage and increased power at the plate. Remember, it's classroom first for the correct mental images. Slow down non-reactionary drills building our muscle memories, and finally, live batting practice to test all our skills. Remember, as the students first begin the drills, they often struggle. However, if we slow down the drills in a building block approach, they'll gain the feel and show constant progress. The students in our drill section are all junior high school students. Kyle, who's in the 8th grade, has hit balls over 350 feet. Justin, only 12 years old and still in Little League, has hit the ball over 300 feet. Baseball World's top students have captured AAU national championships for a 3-year period, leading the tournament in batting average, slugging percentage, while striking out less than any other team in the nation. Thank you for purchasing Teaching the Mechanics of the Major League Swing 2. Please contact Baseball World at 1-800-833-1551 for information on summer super camps, to set up a clinic in your area, to order other Baseball World products, and to order our other exciting videos on hitting, catching, defensive drills, and dynamic practice organization for just $29.95 each. Be sure to ask for special package prices. Best wishes, and thank you from the staff at Baseball World.